Time to go get your coffee ready. Sit in your comfy chair because after the break, I shall call to order this week's meeting of the Velshi Band Book Club. On the agenda this week, Out of Darkness by Ashley Perez. That's next. Out of Darkness, today's feature for the Velshi Band Book Club, could be categorized in several ways. It is a tragic interracial love story. It's an honest and brutal look at racism in the 1930s, and it examines the painful realities of objectifying women. It also is historical fiction. It's set against a real-life tragedy, the New London school explosion. In 1937, a natural gas leak destroyed the entire Texas school, killing nearly 300 students and teachers. But the blast is only one of the book's horrors and not the only one that stays with you after you close the cover. Our heroine is Naomi, a bilingual Mexican-American girl. After the death of her mother, she and her two half-siblings moved to the oil town of New London with her deeply abusive white stepfather, Henry. While Naomi's half-siblings are able to pass as white and easily assimilate to their new surroundings, Naomi's experience is the opposite. But then she finds Wash, one of the few black people in the community. He's kind and provides solace, protection, and the sort of buoyant hope that only comes with a first love. Naomi and Wash are certainly star-crossed lovers, and their end is even more gruesome than that of Romeo and Juliet. There's violence and a rape scene. The effect is devastating and shocking, but it doesn't feel gratuitous. The violence could not exist without the pervasive racism within their Texas town and so much of the nation at the time. It also could not exist without the abusive stepfather's patriarchal need for control. Now, perhaps the true devastation in reading this difficult scene is the realization that something so appalling could also exist outside the pages of a book. Out of Darkness is told from multiple points of view, alternating by chapters. So it's told through the eyes of not just Naomi and Wash, but also from the points of view of Henry, the abusive stepfather, and a group of deeply sexist and racist boys known as the Gang. They function as a collective, a refrain of the racist and sexist songs of the town. The Gang introduces the reader to the relentless objectification and harassment that Naomi faces as a woman every single day, particularly as a Mexican-American woman. The Gang's voice is intentionally crude. One parent in Lake Travis, Texas, took umbrage with the particular passage from one of the Gang's chapters in which the young men of the Gang casually and explicitly discuss what it would be like to rape the main character, Naomi. This parent addressed her local school board, and the speech she made went viral for her tirade against the book. I am not going to play the clip here because this is a family show most of the time, but this parent quoted and zeroed in on a couple of explicit words and urged the school to, quote, start focusing on education and not public health. The public response to that viral video was unsurprisingly split down the middle. Some mocked this woman as overwrought, while others applauded her desire to protect her children. She's far from the only parent or school board to come out against Out of Darkness. The book's been targeted all over the country. It's already reportedly been banned in 16 school districts, and it's number 3 on the American Library Association's top list of 10 most challenged books of 2021. Now, my role as executive chairperson of the Velshi Band Book Club is not to defend Out of Darkness as an easy read or suggest that it's appropriate for every reader. It is neither. It is brutal and searing. Sometimes you need to close the covers and come up for air from this book, Out of the Darkness. But challenging subject matter, emotional writing, and gruesome events do not a banned book make. Assuming you're an advanced reader or emotionally equipped for Out of Darkness, you stand to learn a great deal from it. This book harnesses the power of discomfort that we have talked so much about as a book club. Right after the break, I'm thrilled to be joined by the author of Out of Darkness, Ashley Hope Perez. All right, the Velshi Band Book Club is now in session. I'm thrilled to be joined by Ashley Hope Perez. She's an associate professor of comparative studies at Ohio State University. She's the author of the book Out of Darkness. She's the recipient of numerous honors, including the 2016 Printz Award for Excellence in Young Adult Literature. Ashley, good morning to you, and thank you for joining the Velshi Band Book Club.
Thank you so much for having me.
Look, Out of Darkness is a challenging read. There's no question about it. It is tough. What do you say to parents who argue that their child is not ready for a book like this?
I'm a parent, so I really relate to those concerns, and I would tell them, no problem. Your child doesn't need to read this book, but if they want to read it with them if you have concerns.
Let's talk about the passage that the mother in Lake Travis, Texas, was angry about. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to read out what that passage is. It is graphic. The gang in this scene is imagining what it would be like to rape the main character. It talks about, well, it talks about a lot of tough subject matter. Tell me about that particular thing. This mother seemed to be quite taken by that, and there's a concern that out of context, that makes sense what she said, but it's not out of context. It's a passage in your book that is meant to be about something.
Yeah, so my goal, like many authors, is not to endorse negative behavior, right? But sometimes we need to represent it to be able to show the effects it has on people and their communities. So one of the things that I did in Out of Darkness was use these passages from the perspective of the gang to condense the racism and misogyny that are part of what the main character Naomi has to deal with. So by kind of putting it in a pressure cooker and distilling it down, readers get what it's like to walk into a school space and be confronted with these stares. And we as readers see, what are they thinking? What are they assuming they get to do to her body? And that kind of representation has been really important for readers, especially those who aren't often on the receiving end of that kind of treatment or attention. So certainly young men reading that are not being encouraged to enact those behaviors, but to think about what their choices of words, looks, actions mean for the women in their lives.
Right. So you're connecting something that maybe some young men who are violent and racist would say, but there's also seems to be a subtext to the fact that maybe things that we men say around each other can have a remarkable impact, even if your intent is not what you actually believe it to be.
Correct. Yep. And I think that's one of those things to recognize, that the power of words is not just in your intent, but in the effects that you have, and in what kind of culture you create around other people's bodies and how they're read as available or unavailable. Yeah.
There's a long history of controversial young adult books. Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews, Go Ask Alice by Beatrice Sparks, even Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Paterson. All of these are considered contemporary or cult classics at this point, and they all faced extreme uproar, bans, challenges. Talk to me about writing for this genre. You have to go into it knowing you're going to face this kind of scrutiny.
You do. I mean, this book came out in 2015, so I did anticipate pushback then, and it never came because I think folks recognized what that was, at the height of sort of the emergence of Black Lives Matter movements. And I think folks were receiving it, recognizing what was the significance of these kinds of starting conversations about our racialized violence in our history as we were reckoning with it in our present. But I think that as far as the fact that people get worked up about what young people are reading has to do with fear and control, right? I mean, no one in these school board meetings is talking about the cell phones that are in their kids' pockets, right? They have immediate access to so much content. And what I think is important about literature, and has been in the case of all the books you mentioned and many other works of literature, is the opportunities it creates for young people. So rather than focusing on objections parents have, schools can focus on how they are supporting parents, teachers, librarians, students, in having difficult conversations that we really need to have.
Does it help if the concept around teaching this book in school does include all of the criticism and why? I mean, that's sort of how I remember reading about books. We'd be clear about the fact that this is controversial writing, or certainly was when it was released, and this is how it's evolved. Wouldn't that be the goal? Sitting there and saying, here's the teacher's guide to Out of Darkness, as opposed to let's not read Out of Darkness.
Sure. I mean, first of all, I don't know that Out of Darkness has ever been an assigned book in any classroom. It's the most inclusion it's had in curriculum is as like a book club choice.
Right.
So an option. So it's always optional reading for young people. And I think that that's important to stress when folks are looking at the books that are being banned across the country. We're talking about removing them as choices from libraries. So yes, a teacher's guide, if a teacher wants to teach Out of Darkness, they should certainly prepare students and their parents for the kind of content it has. However, in most cases, this is just a book that's available on the shelf, along with Faulkner and Hemingway and all the many other works of literature that also engage with difficult content.
This is
The
an
Bible,
interesting and
that's my
important
favorite.
point that you make, because a lot of books that are challenged or banned are not taught to students. They're just available to students.
Correct. That's right.
Ashley,
and I was a high school teacher, so I can say I wouldn't assign this to a 10th grade literature class.
Right, but that's what we face. We face a whole lot of people saying, yeah, there's certainly people this book isn't for, but it's for other people. Let's keep that available for people and let them make informed choices if they're equipped to handle it. Thank you so much for joining us in the Velshi Banned Book Club. Ashley Hope Perez is the author of the banned book, Out of Darkness. I could continue this conversation for ages, by the way. And guess what? Today I get to do just that. I'm going to keep speaking with the author right after our show ends on TV, and you'll be able to stream the extended cut of this discussion later this week exclusively on Peacock. Be sure to check it out. But for